Right, in today's lesson, sorry I had the microphone turned off there, we're going to be looking at some problems. Okay, so we're going to look at exam questions that cause problems for my year 10s. Only 20% of them got this question right, less than 20% got this question right. We're going to be looking at these exam questions, how to do them, and build up the skills you need to do these questions. So let's start off with expanding brackets, easier of the two. And we're going to look at how to do this. Now, what you need to do, you need to have the skills to do basic expanding and factorizing. I'm not going to go over that too much. I will show you how to expand questions like x plus 2 squared and x minus 2 squared. But really what you need to do is you need to practice this, and you need an app like this. This is a screenshot from Mathletics. Shows you some ones you can try. So you need to be able to get these. You can see my class are quite good at these. So even though they can generally get 100% on these expansions, when they came to using expansions to do this one, they didn't use it correctly, because in their expansion questions, they're only expected to do, say, expand that, or just expand this. But when asked to expand both and put them together, it seemed to cause them a problem. So what we're going to do is we're just going to look at this, okay? How to put those together, and just to check we can skills. And then we'll move on to completing the square, which is a much more complicated skill. And there's two ways to do it. You can either work out an understanding, or you can make sure you can just do it by rote. And we'll look at both ways of doing it, depending on what you prefer. When you have to do things just by rote, you actually need to do more practice. Okay, because you've got to commit things to memory, and it takes a little bit longer to get it done because you have to keep back to it to remember the method by just by doing it without actually really understanding what's going on. But it can be easier for some students to understand what's still get the question right. Now let's just start off with this question. I'm just going to give you 30 seconds just to get stuck into it and see how you do on that, and then we'll go through it. Right, so that might have been a little bit tricky doing 30 seconds, but at least you get your chance to get teeth into it and see what's going on. And then when I go through it, you get a better understanding if you did make a mistake. The first thing we need to do is we need to realize that x plus 2 all squared is the same as x plus 2 times x plus 2. And that is a common mistake. Okay, it's not to just write out that bracket. And therefore x minus 2 all squared is the same as x minus 2 times by x minus 2. Because straight away what a lot of people do is they just square this x and they just square this 2. That was the most common mistake. So when they wrote out their answer, they just got x squared plus 4, which you'll see in a minute is not correct. And then for the second bit, they got x squared minus 4, or x squared plus 4 again, depending on how good they were at squaring the minus. And they could have got answers like 2x squared plus 8 or 2x squared just on its own. And all those are not correct answers. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just look at how to expand this. So when we expand this, the one technique I tend to teach is FOIL. Okay, and what does FOIL stand for? Well, it stands for first, outer, inner, last. And the reason why I teach this, I used to teach the old smiley face method, but if you don't do the smiley face in the right order, it can make simplification a little bit trickier. If you use FOIL, then the simplification becomes much easier. So if we look at the first two things, so that's x and x are the first two things, and we multiply those out, we get x squared. And next what we're going to do is we're going to look at the outer two things, so the x and the 2. So that gives us a x. And then we look at the inner two. So the 2 times x, which is another 2x. And last, we're going to look at the last two. Got them out a bit dark there, so just colour that. Yeah, but you can see where those two things were. The last two things we're going to look at here. And we get 2 times 2, which is... That's for the first bit. So we've just expanded that to there. Now, if we next do the same here, so first two things, x and x, so we get x squared. Outer two things, x times minus 2 is minus 2x. And then we're going to do the inner two things, another minus 2x. And the last two things, minus 2 times minus 2 is plus 4. So we've now expanded that to get that. And you see, in the middle, we have like terms. We have two terms with just x's and no squares and not just numbers. And what you'll see is you've got 3 types of terms. You've got the x squared term, you've got the x's term, and you've got the numbers term. Okay, we've got the x squared term, we've got the x's term, we've got the numbers term. You can only group like terms. You must group the x squareds, you must group the x's, and you must group the numbers. You can't group x's with x squareds. So if you've got different powers, you cannot group them. So we're going to do x squared plus x squared, which gives us 2x squared. And then we've got the 2x plus the 2x, which is 4x. Then a minus 2x and a minus 2x minus 4x. If we add all those up, we get no x's. Okay, so if we add these two yellow bits, we can see they are just going to cancel out and leave us no x's. And last, we're going to add up the end two terms, plus 4, and that will give us plus 8. So when we simplify this, our final answer is 2x plus 8. Okay, if there's no questions, I'll move on. Have a look at the next one. A little bit longer. This is a little bit more involved, a little bit trickier. Let's give you, I'm just talk a little bit, and I'll start the clock in a second. I'm going to keep it longer. My timer is for 30 seconds, so plenty of place to do the working in, and then go through this. That's the 30 seconds up there. Okay. A few more seconds. Finishing it off. Right, again, I'm going to use foil. My first brackets. Okay. Actually, I just remember, I was going to write it out just so as you get the idea. Scratch that. Let's just remember, always write out squareds as 2 sets of brackets. Remember, squared means times it by itself. So you've got 2x plus 1 times 2x plus 1. And we've got x minus 2 times x minus 2. So this bit here, 10. This bit here, this bit, and this bit here is that bit there. So we're going to write out FOIL. First, outer, inner, last. First two things, 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2 times 2 is 4. X times x is x squared. And then we're going to do the outer two things. So the 2x times the 1 gives me another 2x. And then I'm going to do the inner two things. 1 times 2x is another 2x. And the last two things, 1 times 1 is 1. And then I'm going to add onto that this next set of FOIL for this second set of brackets. X times x, my first two things. That's x squared. And then I got my outer two things, x times minus 2, so it's going to be minus 2x. Do be careful, there's a plus here. So plus minus 2x gives me minus 2x. And then I'm going to do the inner two things. Minus 2 times x is minus another 2x. And minus 2 times minus 2 is plus 4. Okay, and we can group our terms. So the 2x squared terms here, we've got a 4x squared and an x squared, which gives us 5x squared. 2x plus 2x minus 2x minus 2x. Again, all of this is going to cancel. So the 2x cancels with minus 2x, and this 2x cancels with minus 2x. Or you added these together, you get these two together, you get 4x, and you add these two together, you get minus 4x. Either way, it's going to cancel. And then we add the 1 to the 4. So that's going to give us 5. And that one expanded. Okay, I'm just going to do one more. Leave you one here. What I'll do is I will actually put more into the note. I'll fill these 3 after I finish the notebook. So when you download the notebook, you can have a go at a few more. And over the next week, I'll update those. So let's have a look at one. Let's give you a little bit of time. Just jump away from that one, just because it's going to get us a lot of cancelling. Let's look at this one. Do that one. 30 seconds to have a go at that, because there's going to be less cancelling. A little bit different. Don't worry if you can't do those in the 30 seconds. Okay, that's why we're going to go through them. You should be able to expand these in about 30 seconds when you get good at them. So come back to them, practice them every couple of weeks. If you go to the beginning of my book, it talks about, the beginning of my notebook, it talks about how to get better at maths. Okay, so what I've done is I've looked at the key questions that students found difficult in the exam. Good idea to attempt that question going through this notebook, and then you can see if you actually understand all the material I'm going to do when I go through that lesson, and whether you can actually take shortcuts to revision. If you can't do it, go through the revision material. Okay, look at the videos, do the question. Now, I'll attach all my stream videos to the notebook, okay, so you can then go through the videos later. And if you did struggle, or if you didn't get it right, do attempt again a couple of days after you've watched the video to check you haven't forgot it. And then try a week later to do more exam questions. Once you've got the hang of it, keep practicing until you're really, really sure that you're always going to do it. And where possible, always do every maths question without a calculator, because you have a non-calculator exam. And do remember, best mathematicians aren't afraid to get them wrong. Best mathematicians will have got more questions wrong than you ever do. Mathematicians in the world spent their lives getting maths questions wrong, working out how to get them. Be afraid. Okay, getting questions wrong. Bad at that. So let's just go through this question. So again, I'm going to write out the two brackets. So 3x plus 1 times 3x plus 1. That's what 3x plus 1 squared means. And then we're going to do 2x minus 2 times 2x minus 2. And we get multiply out using our FOIL. I'm going to write out FOIL again to get you to help you remember for both of these. And notice there's a nasty little minus here, which people miss out and consequently make mistakes. Now, what might be a better idea is actually when we're just doing this FOIL, we put a big bracket around all of that and then put a minus in between to help us remember. Is a good little trick. And on this FOIL, put a bracket around all of that, and then you won't make mistakes with your signs. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So 3x times 3x is 9x squared. 3 times 3 is 9. X times x squared. We can't do anything with the 9 and the x squared. The outer two things, 3x times 1 is 3x. And the inner two things is 1 times 3x. That's going to be another x. And the last two things is going to give me 1. First two things, 2x times 2x is 4x squared. The outer two things, 2x times minus 2 is minus 4. The inner two things, minus 2 times minus 2x is also minus 4x. Minus 2 times 2 is minus 4. And minus 2 times minus 2 is plus 4. I think I might have just said here, back here, when I was doing this one, minus 2 times minus 2 is actually minus 2 times a plus 2. All right, and now I'm going to take all of this away from that. Okay, now if you don't want to put the brackets in, you're quite quick. You might have already realized minus and a minus, that'll turn that into plus, minus and a minus, that'll turn that into plus, but then you have to have the plus. You know, if you don't have the brackets, you've got to change everything. So that will become a minus and that will become. Sometimes I think in this case it's easier to keep the bracket in. So 9x squared minus 4x squared is 5x squared. And I've got a 3x plus 3x, which is 6x. Notice how there's two terms next to each other. Minus, and I've got a minus 8x. So I've got 6x minus minus 8x. So two minuses will give me a plus. So that 6x plus 8x gives me plus 14x. And then I've got 1 minus 4. Okay, you got plus 1 minus a 4. That will give you 3. Okay, that will do for that. I think there's one there you can practice. I'll put in the answer to that later on today, and I'll put in 3 more questions, then put the answers to that in the next week. So you have plenty to practice that. Next, we're going to go on to this topic, completing the square, and if we have time, we'll get on to some simple identities as well. Have this completing the square and some simple identity. So let's just look at. I'm just going to give you a little while to look at this. Rewrite in the form x minus m in brackets squared, okay, and then minus n. Now that minus may be a minus. Plus that minus again there. These two minuses, okay, here and here, they could be pluses, right? You wouldn't write minus plus something, and you wouldn't write minus minus something. You would actually simplify down to that's a minus and that's a plus. And if you had plus minus, you'd simplify that down to a minus, and you wouldn't write plus plus, you'd plus. Okay, and if you ended up with a plus, you wouldn't turn it into a minus minus. Okay, so let's just write one symbol in there that actually makes the thing right. Okay, so if m comes out as negative, don't do minus minus 2, write plus 2. Anyway, enough of me talking about that and confusing things. Just have a go, and then I will self. Let's just passing away. So we're going to try and write this in this form. Now, the trick to doing these questions is realizing what goes on in completing the square. Okay, well, completing the square always depends on x plus something squared. Let's just say, well, it's in this case we've done m or minus m. Is knowing what happens when you expand x plus m and knowing that off by heart. Let's just do the expansion of that. That's x plus n times x plus m. This is what we call a perfect square. And what we do is we add or take away something to complete that perfect square to make it equal to the expression that we're dealing with here. Okay? Equal to that expression that we're dealing with there. So let's just multiply this out again. So we get x squared plus the, let's just remember our FOIL. First, outer, inner, last. Let's help you remember that. X times m is mx. M times x for the inner plus mx. Last two things plus an m squared. Way? So we get x squared plus 2 lots of mx. We've got an mx here and an mx here. That's one lot of mx plus another lot of mx. You add 2 lots of mx together, you get 2 mx. All right. So if you're confused about how to add these things, just think of it: one lot plus another lot gives me 2 lots, and we just got the m squared on the end. Now we're dealing with none of these can be combined here, okay? Because we've got an x squared there, so it's got an extra power or something. We've got an extra single power, and we've got no x's here. So just looking at the x's, we cannot combine and simplify this. So do not try to simplify things which can't be simplified, because it's impossible. Now the key thing is to notice we always get double that value here when we expand. We always get double that value here when we expand. And if you remember that, that will hopefully be enough for you to always get these questions right, because that's the key thing. If we always get double that value, then we always need to half this value. Starting point, always halve value. That's your starting point. This assumes we've only got one lot of x squared. Okay, this assumes we've only got one lot of x squared. When we've got more than one x squared, then we need to do something first. But just for these simple ones, we're just going to start off with a simple one for you to look at, and we're just going to look at halving that value there. So half of minus 4 is minus 2. So therefore, our number that's going to go in there is minus 2, and we're going to get our, if you notice, when we expand this, we've got x squared and we've got x squared, so they will always match. The whole point of completing the square is when you've got this thing here, it always matches up perfectly. It always matches up perfectly, this and this, when you expand it. The only thing it doesn't match up perfectly is the plus 5. The only thing it doesn't match up perfectly. Now, there's 2 ways to do this. Okay? There's what I said, the learn by rote way, and then there's the understanding way. Now, the learn by rote way is to understand. There's a little bit of understanding in it if you want to. It's to understand every time you expand this, you always get an m squared on the end. Now, what we can do is therefore is whatever this number is here, we're always going to get plus that squared. So let's take away that number squared. So let's take away minus 2 squared. So take away the minus 2 all squared, and then add on the number we always want. Okay, plus 5. So let's just simplify that. X minus 2 all squared. Minus 2 squared is 4, so you get a minus 4 here. Plus 5 is going to be plus 1. So we've now got our completed square form. So I'm just going to write that out a bit neatly. Answers. So we get x plus 1. That is completed the square. There's our square. There we have completed it. This now equals this. And you should never get these wrong, because you can always check. Let's expand this. Let's use FOIL to expand x minus 2 squared. Now, remember what I said. If we've done this right, we always get the 2 blue bits. Always. X minus 2 squared. Let's write that out. X minus 2 squared is the same as x minus 2 times x minus 2. We've got a plus 1 here. X times x is x. Okay, so I'll just notice I've got a question. That. Why is m2 if the 2? don't quite understand that question. I'll keep going and see if that person can clarify that question. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is multiply this out, and hopefully it might clarify the answer to this question anyway. So we've got x times x squared, and we've got a minus 2 times x is minus 2x, and minus 2 times this x is x, and then we've got minus 2 times minus 2 is a plus 4, and then we've got a plus 1 on the end. So we now combine those. Minus 2x gives me minus 4x. Notice what I said. The brackets always give me this blue bit. I've got the blue bit from the brackets. But the brackets gave me this plus 4. But I need 4 is I get my 5 because that little extra tweak on the end gave me that plus 5. Why is a highlighted M? Oh, I see. Okay. Why is this bit here an m squared? Okay, let's go back to this. We've got x plus m all squared. This is the question I've been asking at. X plus m all squared. I've got an x. When we write that out, remember x plus m all squared means x plus m times x plus m. And we use our FOIL. I'll just write it over here. It's going to ruin that question, but I'll rub it out in a minute. We do our first two things, which gives me x squared. My outer two things gives me the mx, and my inner two things gives me the mx. So first two things x squared, outer two things, inner two things, and then the last two things here, m times m gives me the m squared. Okay, it gives me the m squared, and that's what I always need to take that away. Okay, minus 2 when I've got this is going to be minus 2 times minus 2, so I get a minus 2 squared. Take that away and then add on the number I really want, the 5 at the end. Okay, hopefully that's answered that question in chat. It can be a little bit confusing on the y. Now, we've touched on the understanding way of doing it, because the understanding way is to understand this is what happens when you try it out. Let's just rub all that out, because we don't need that, and we don't want to memorize that, because actually that's sounds like a nasty formula. So if we remember that when doing this by rote, without understanding, we always write x minus 2 squared, because we always halve that number. We always take that number squared away, so we always take minus 2 squared away, and then we always add the 5. Okay, and that will give me my answer here. So that's one way of doing it. Now the other way of doing it is still to you still got to always remember that when you expand this bracket here, okay, when you expand that bracket there, you always need half this value here. So we're always going to have x minus 2 squared. Now my other way of doing it is to expand this bracket. So I won't show the double bracket expansion. I'm just going to expand it in my head, and this is what happens when you expand it. And this is really good for those of you who are good at expanding it. So I've got x squared minus 4x plus 4, and what I really want is x squared minus 4x plus 5. And what we can see is these are not the same. We want x plus 5, and we don't have x plus 5. We need an extra 1. Let's just add on x 1. So this way of doing it, all you've got to remember is to halve that value. Get your brackets, square it to get this answer, compare it with what you want, and then add on or take away whatever you need to make it. Okay, and I'm going to do the rest of the questions, the next question, just like that one. So hopefully that gives you two ways to look at it. You can either always halve this value and then always take away that bit squared and always add on the 5 on the end you want, or you can just expand that brackets, get what expansion gives you, compare it with what you need, and then add on the thing you need at the end. Okay, I'll do both these. We'll look at this question, a nice straightforward one. Try doing it both ways. So I'll give you a minute to do this question. See if you can do it both ways. See if you get the same answer. Check your answer by multiplying out at the end. Give you a minute to do that. Right, let's have a look at this. So I'm just going to look at it with the rote method first. So if you remember what I said, we are just going to halve that value straight away. So we get x minus 4 squared. Then I'm going to take away this thing squared. And then just add that on the end. Okay. And if I do that, minus 4 squared is 16. Sorry, minus 4 squared is 16. Minus 16 plus 5 will give me minus 11. And if we do it the other way I suggest, which is to just get to this stage first, expand it. So if you do the expansion, I'm going to do it fast. Actually, no, it's quite good practice. You see me expanding it properly. If you're not the world's best expander, always remember, write x minus 4 times x minus 4. I cannot enforce this enough. The number of times I see students just write this, which is completely wrong, or possibly write this. Both of those are completely wrong because you haven't done the FOIL. I'm just going to write out the FOIL. So first two things times together gives me x squared. Out of the two things gives me minus 4x. Inner two things gives me another minus 4x. Last two things 15. Combine that all together, I get this. Okay, so you should get to a stage where you hopefully will jump straight from here to here. Okay, but until you're confident in that, I would suggest always writing out the brackets. So we've got x squared minus 8x plus 16. We compare that with what we want. And we see we've got plus 16, we want 5, so we need to take away 11. So I'm going to take away 11 from this bracket. Okay, so there's your two ways, the rote way and the comparison. Okay, right, let's just... What I'm going to do is, there's some more to practice. This one's got fractions, so it will test your ability with fractions. This one is another nice, easy, straightforward one. What we're going to do is jump to the ones which don't have single x squared. You've got a number in front of the x squared. And before we can do this, what we need to do is we need to take out a factor of 2. So whatever this number is here, we need to take that factor out. Okay, we need to factor that out. So first of all, we write that factor there. Then we put a big bracket, and we're going to have x squared. 2 times x squared is 2x squared. And here, what do we need to tie 2 by to get 4x? We need a plus 2x in here. 2x times 2 is 4x. And then we've got 2 times something gives me minus 12. It's going to be minus 6. And then we just do our completing the square magic on here. Just this bit here for the time being. So we write the 2, keep the brackets there, and then do something completing the square. Now, to stop you getting confused, I'm going to actually just write a different type of bracket. make it easy. And also I'm going to write this one in red. Okay, so we do the completing the square magic in the middle. So remember, we always halve this value, plus 1 squared. Now I'm going to just do the quickly multiplying out comparison, so because I can multiply out really quickly and get it wrong. Right. Pen's just going faster than my brain faster than my pen. So I get x squared plus 2x plus 1, and I need a minus 6, so I've got to take away 7. Okay, that's how you can do it using the comparison method. If I was just doing it by rote, let's just quickly do it by rote. So it's all pretty similar. I still need the x plus 1 squared, take away the 1 squared, okay, and then add on the number I want again. So minus 1 squared is minus 1 plus minus 6 gives me I should say minus 6. Okay, so I've got to there. Now I haven't quite got it in this form because there is no square brackets in this form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the square brackets. So 2 times all of that, I get 2 times all of that. That's one section. And then I'm going to do 2 times all of that. 15. And now I've got it in a completed square format. Okay, where I've got a number at the front. I've got my A is 2, I've got my M. Okay, so they're saying if you've got x minus m, in this case, to get the m, you need to realize m is going to be minus 1. Minus and minus gives me pluses. M must be 1 in this case. A bit confusing. It would generally in the exam they wouldn't do that. I've just done all the questions the same, so I put a minus here when actually there's a plus there. In the exam they'd be kinder to you and say ax plus m here, and you'd realize m is 1 in that case. All right, and then my n on the end is minus 4. Okay, right. What we're going to do is we're going to finish off. Okay, you've got some more questions you can go away and practice. I'll put the answers in over the next week. What we're going to do is we're not going to have time in the stream to do the identities, but what we're going to do is we're going to finish off solving by completing the square. Now I'm going to jump a little bit ahead because this one's quite straightforward. We just do a standard complete square and then do normal techniques. I'm going to jump forward. Actually, no, let's do a simple one and then do a trickier one. I'll give you 30 seconds to have a go at this one. Okay, and then I'll go through it, and then we'll look at one that's a okay. Well, let's see how you got on with that. Might have been a bit tricky to do that in 30 seconds, but you at least know if you got the right idea. Okay. If you're looking at the stream later, you could just pause my video now. Same with all my questions. Pause it and finish off the question if you want to. You want to try and get to the stage where you can do these questions quickly. Then that means you really understand and really get them, and also it gives you it gives you a lot more time in the exam when it comes to the trickier problem-solving questions, because these are actually standard methods we're looking at here. There's no problem-solving going on. In the exam, you want to have time for the questions which have got lots of words in it. You've got to try and work out what's going on. So you knock off these easy questions like this, and they're not easy maths, but once you know the method, they're easy. Okay? And you can actually then spend more time on the exam questions. So practice and practice and practice till you get your speed up. So let's just complete the square on this to start off with. That's what you do. So I'm just going to run through that really quickly. Lots of video work on completing the square. I just half the 6. I'm going to square that. I think to myself, oh, that 3 squared is 9, and I want plus 3. So I'm going to need a minus 6 here to make it work. And now you just do this with normal algebra. But there's going to be a little careful thing in the middle you've got to be careful of. We always, when doing algebra and finding out what x is, think where x is, that's the inside, and we always do the last, we always get rid of the last thing you do to x first. So the last thing we do to x is the -6 if you're doing BODMAS. The second last thing is the squared, so that'll be the next thing we'll get rid of. And then, okay, the next thing to get rid of is the +3. So we're going to get rid of, in this order, the -6, then the squared, and then the +3. That's the order, 1, 2, 3. Get rid of those things. So let's do that. So let's get rid of the +6 from both sides. Well, we'll get rid of the 6 from here by adding 6 to the side, and that means we have to add 6 to the other side. Okay. Next thing we want to do, undo the square with square root. Okay, so we're going to undo the square with square root. Now this is where a lot of students will lose the marks because they'll just do that. And actually what you need to remember is if we had, say, 2 squared, we get 4, and if we have -2 squared, we'd also get 4. Therefore, if we want to know, let's just say we didn't have the number 2 here, okay, and we just replace that with an x, what squared equals 4? Well, we now know there's 2 possible answers to that, 2 or -2, and we have to consider both possible answers in our answer. So we've got a 2 or a -2. So when we undo this square, we've got a positive and a negative version of this number that could be right. So we can have a plus or a minus. And we write plus or minus. Mathematicians are lazy. We don't write plus +√6 or -√6. You can, and that'll be perfectly good if you want to do that. We tend to just write plus minus to mean that or that. And now we want to get rid of this +3 here. So get the x on its own. We take away 3 from that side, and we also take away 3 from the other side. Now, if your algebra is not strong, you'll think, okay, I want to take 3 away from this, and I'll write it like that. Now, to mathematicians, that looks quite ugly. The way we would write it is we write -3 plus or minus √6. This sort of plus minus, put that in the middle, looks neater. Okay, it's a bit more aesthetically pleasing. So we get that. I'm just going to move a couple of seconds. Let this, move it out of this question just to tidy up my notebook. Okay, so if you wanted to write the answer as this plus this or this minus this, that is okay. If the question says work out to 3 decimal places or 2 decimal places, then you need to put these numbers into the calculator. But I'm not going to bother that. I hope you can write -3 plus 6 into the calculator anyway. But if you don't have right to 3 decimal places, 2 decimal places, you can leave your answer just like this. Leave your answer just like this. Now to finish off, we'll just look at one which is a little bit trickier in that we'll have not just an x squared, we'll have a number times the x squared. So let's just drop down to here. Okay. A tip with solving quadratics: before you, even with completing the square, get all the everything on the same side and always get it equal to 0. And hopefully you should all know how to solve quadratics by factorizing. That's another video. Try and find another video if you don't. But whatever you do in quadratics, okay, these are all called quadratics because the highest power is a squared. Always get your equation equal to 0 first. Okay, I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to, after that hint, to try and finish. Okay, let's see. Probably quite time pressure with 30 seconds. Right, let's look at this one. So remember what I said? I said get all the numbers on the same side. And you get that. Now, when the difference is here is we don't need to do this thing we did over here because we've got the equals naught. The equals naught makes life a lot easier. And we can use this little trick to make the question easier. We don't want that 2x because that 2x there, that 2 there makes completing the square hard. So let's just divide everything by 2. Divide the whole thing by 2. So we divide that by 2, we get x squared. We divide this by 2, we get minus 2x. We divide this by 2, we get minus 5. Okay? And that's what we do. We make it life easier. So we've got a nice, easy completing the square to do. Now, I just want to talk about that again, because a common mistake I see students make, trying to rub out that highlighter, is that they don't understand what to divide by. You know, if I divide by 2, some students would just divide by 2, and they might write they might write x squared minus 4x minus 10 equals 0, because they just want to divide that 2x by 2, and they don't remember to do all the terms. Whenever you do an equation, you must do the same to every term. Okay, every term. So you do the same to every term. Now I'm going to make that in capitals. That is really key. Do the same to every term. Right? Just going to just grab that for a second and just move it up there. To do the same to every term. So what is a term? Because a lot of students don't really know what a term is. Terms are things which are separated by either a minus, a plus, or an equals. A minus, a plus, or an equals. So here are my terms in this expression. I'll just get a different highlighter because I'm bright and blue. So there's one term. There's another term. There's another term. And there's another term. So there are 4 terms in this expression, and we divide each one of those by 2 to get my answer. So if you can remember that, what a term is, and remember you should always do the same thing to every term, you will make less mistakes. So let's complete the square. I'm going to speed that up because this is about solving the equation. I'm going to get a plus, one want to expand that one, minus 5, so I'm going to get a minus 6. Is this now turned into exactly the same question? Okay, so I get that. I then add 6 to both sides. I'm now going to square a root. And remember, at that point where I get rid of this squared thing, here, when I get rid of that squared, that means I'm going to need a plus minus, because I had something squared equals 6. That could be either plus root 6 or minus root 6. And then I get to my final answer. I'm going to add on 1 to both sides, and the way I like to do that is to write like this. And that's a perfectly good answer. Remember, if they ask to so many decimal places, put it into your calculator and get it out. If you don't like the idea, you want to add your 1 like that, that's okay. It just doesn't look as neat. It doesn't matter. Do it. So there you go. Some more questions to practice. I will put the answers in these boxes in due course. You can download this sheet. And then once you've got this sheet, just refresh. So you don't refresh, it will automatically upload to your sheet. That's going to be the end of this presentation. If you're lucky enough to be in my class and got some more questions you want to ask, or any questions of any of the lessons we've done lately, go to the Zoom meeting. I will start that in 5 minutes. 10:50. Start the Zoom meeting at 10:50. And have a good day.